Well, yes, indeed. It's our Independence Day edition of Sunrise Daily, and we'll be taking a look at the President's speech on this day, this Nigeria's Day. Well, we've got a lineup of guests, so might as well just go ahead as you may. We've got Professor Anthony Killer here with us in the studio. He is the Director, Center for International Advanced and Professional Studies. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning.
And then we have Prof Dequoi, who is a Senior Advocate of Nigeria, joining us via Zoom. We also do have Professor Epiphany Azinge, who himself is also a Senior Advocate of Nigeria. And then Professor Khalifa Dequoi is a lecturer, public affairs and political analyst of the University of Maiduguri. He joins us from our studios in Maiduguri, while Mr. Azinge joins us from our studios in Abuja. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us today. And happy Independence Day to you all.
Same to you, thank you.
All right, so, Prof, let's start off with you. I mean, listening to the President deliver that speech, quite a lengthy speech, clearly, but, you know, you might have had some sort of expectations, but when the speech, you know, after the speech was delivered, what are your immediate impressions?
Well, I think the content are quite topical to the extent that it touches the issues that people are talking about: insecurity, the fragility of the bond of the country Nigeria, social media, unemployment, infrastructure. It's a very topical speech, you know, which I think the president, the presidency, and the speechwriter would argue that this is what we're doing, we're addressing what people need. I am of a very different approach. I don't know how popular or how mainstream or not. My idea is that the Independence Day speech should be more historical, more visionary than topical. It should be a speech that talks about why we are Nigeria. It should be a speech that says the Nigeria green, white, green is not the Union Jack. It should be a speech that pays tribute to those who moved the call for independence and recognizes the vision of the founding fathers. But I guess there's so many unsettled issues about Nigeria, and those discussions cannot come forward.
So that means the speech was realistic compared to what we're currently facing?
Absolutely. It was topical, but it's not visionary. And, you know, and I say this, you know, in a subdued way. The president is a captain of being subdued. So I think, good company there. You know, I say it is not as a major criticism. It's just because we have people growing up, we should offer that different view of the world to understand how certain things ought to be, not just to get used to the prosaic, topical, day-to-day thing.
What then does that say? Because the question of vision, yes, you know, is quite topical and a strong one. Yes. A number of people have referenced it over time. Yes. Is that to say that there isn't a national ethos or vision, or it's just he just felt he needed to be a lot more realistic than visionary at this time?
I think it's a mix of the two. I think there are times for everything. I think a day like this is a day of ethos and vision. There are topical issues, but it'll always be there, and there are moments to handle it. You know, I think that part of the problems we face is that fundamental lack of ethos, pathos, and vision. So when it comes to, for example, you know, and I hold this very dear to me, we're on a day of Independence Day, and nobody mentions Anthony and Howard. I cringe. That who are we really? You know, what are we building? How this fabric that we're putting together is flawed intellectually, morally weak, and emotionally unbalanced. And you cannot expect big things to come from such a flawed foundation, is my argument. You see, it is necessary. Topical issues are necessary. But, you know, as we say, man shall not live by bread alone. And that is why sometimes the discourse, the narrative, our political public narrative, is sometimes so topical and, you know, insipid at times.
All right, let's bring in Mrs. Dequoi here. She also joins us via Zoom. Good morning again, and thank you for joining us today. What sticks out for you from the president's speech?
Morning, everyone, and I won't say happy independence. I'm not sure we're very happy as a nation at this point in time. I think I'd rather say have a restful Independence Day. What sticks out for me in the president's speech as a lawyer was his comment about specialized courts and the issues that would be taken about specialized courts. And I wondered as I heard that, whether that would solve the problem of justice for the people or would further compound it. What also stuck out for me was his reference to Twitter. We shall have to wait and see how soon we will all be able to access Twitter again. I think that Twitter is a veritable tool for direct access to government, not just by the youth, but by everyone, to allow the government to know what the people feel and the people's reaction. And if you look at what happened, for instance, in the US, Donald Trump won the election because he communicated directly with the people, not through the organized organs of government. But that's another story. So for me, it's the reference to the judicial system and the reference to the youth and Twitter. I'm also, and that he's going to put more youth in government. Yes, the presidency is not the federal government, but the presidency is the touchstone, the leader, the head of the executive arm of the federal government. And in that capacity, the federal government can do much to change the narrative of changing Nigeria from a gerontocracy, which it is, to a nation that harnesses the full expanse of the youth that are available. And there's a lot that we need to do to get there.
So you don't think that having specialized courts, because I know that this argument raged even for when they talked about specialized courts for other matters. So you don't think this is the way to go?
No, I don't. Simple issues. Who's going to man the courts? Are you going to appoint more people? That means you're going to increase the emoluments, remuneration, provision of facilities. Where's the infrastructure going to come from? Where are the courts going to sit? Secondly, if you're taking the judges who are currently working and are overworked and putting them in these specialized courts, then one aspect of the judicial system is going to suffer at the response of the other. So specialized courts to me is not the answer. For me, the answer is to harness the tools that are readily available. Access to technology, a technological platform, rules that will enhance the speedy administration of justice. I'm not a supporter of specialized courts.
In other words, we shouldn't just take solace in the fact that they're mainstreaming the conversation at the moment.
Oh, yes. I totally agree that we are mainstreaming the conversation because it's allowing us to talk about it. But I'm a bit uncomfortable with the solution that's being proposed.
Well, Professor Zinge, if you could just go ahead and let us know your thoughts on the president's speech. Quite lengthy, 37 minutes, unlike what we've seen in the past. What are your immediate thoughts?
Well, I agree that this has been one of the most expansive, comprehensive speeches ever delivered by Mr. President, and far-reaching to a very large extent, I must confess. Well, we have to firstly consider whether he was able to address the issues that the people of Nigeria ordinarily will want to hear, and that will be the policy of what you want to hear. And to a very large extent, maybe he was able to touch upon most of them and address them succinctly. I felt comfortable with the comprehensive review of the way we have addressed the issue of COVID-19. Expectedly, one should think that the issue of insecurity and how we plan to navigate around it should be in the front burner, and I think obviously he also dealt with that. the way we are presently in the country, all over the nation, Southeast in particular at the moment, the issue of insecurity should be at the front burner of any national conversation. And then, of course, the Twitter aspect of it. He also dwelled on education, amongst others. And then, of course, my learned brother Silk joining us from Zoom seemed to have captured the aspect of specialized courts. Not that I agree entirely with the fact that we cannot at this point in time be thinking of that specialized court. But of course, the point has been made that mainstreaming the conversation is very, very important. And touching upon that means that obviously it is at the back of the mind of the government of the day, and they are trying to see what can be done in that regard. But speeches are made. What are the realities on the ground? And that should be my own approach to the conversation. The realities on the ground are such that the economic indices are not too good enough for us, even though he also touched on that. But when are we getting out of the poverty level that we found ourselves? How well have we addressed other aspects of our health architecture, apart from the COVID aspect of it? And how soon are we believing that the economy obviously will strengthen once more in terms of the exchange rate, naira to dollar, naira to pound, naira to euro, as the case may be? So these are issues I'm sure that going forward will obviously confront us, and I'm sure that as we progress, we have to address them as convincingly as possible.
Well, part of the president's statements this morning says clearly that critics misdiagnose incremental progress as stagnation. And he had earlier on reeled out some of those achievements. He reiterated the plan to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty over the next 10 years. Talked about the trader money, the farmer money, the homegrown school feeding program. But for you, I know there's been talk about whether this was visionary enough, whether it was historical enough, as opposed to being topical. You seem to be swinging to that topical aspect, or at least a topical perspective. But when the president says that critics see incremental progress as stagnation, what do you see? Stagnation, incremental progress, or what?
Well, it is difficult because maybe we don't have all the statistics, but the man in the street will certainly not see any incremental progress or progress at all. Perhaps not even stagnation, because stagnation will mean that we are still on the same pedestal. Maybe the man in the street will be thinking that we are retrogressing to a very large extent, and that for me does not inspire confidence or hope, as the case may be. But having said that, it is important. It is important that the president has tried to be as realistic as possible. I don't, in all honesty, believe that this is the time for us to be visionary. We've done this for 61 years, for God's sake. There's nothing we don't know anymore. We have an idea of the hope and expectation of the people of this country moving forward. Where were we in 1960? Where do we think that we should be at this point in time? We've not gotten there. Perhaps there were obstacles on the highway. There were bumps here and there. The military intervention somewhere along the line, the civil war, amongst others. But at this point in time, Nigerians want to be realistic. Take us out of the quagmire. Let us have food on our table. Let us have the infrastructure necessary for us. Let us be able to travel on the highway, as the case may be, among so many other things. Let there be security. Let people move freely in this country. This is what people want to hear. We want to be as realistic as possible. So I don't think currently the average Nigerian wants to listen to philosophical speeches, empty promises, as the case may be, and being quote and unquote visionary, as some may claim. So I think that the time is for us to know exactly where we are moving, how we'll get there, and what portends for us for the future. I think that is as realistic as it can be.
Well, I'm sure Professor Kela will have some responses to that. But before we do that, let's try to go reach Professor Dequoi. Been trying to reach him earlier. So, Prof, if you can hear us loud and clear, I'd like to take your initial thoughts on the president's speech. What sticks out for you the most in that speech?
Yes, Ayo. Good morning, citizens of this great country. Good morning, gentlemen. My initial take is that we have every reason to celebrate our 61 years of togetherness. And luckily this time you invited mostly senior advocates of Nigeria, and only me and Professor Kila were outside. But I am a senior student of Justice Nikki Toby in the 80s, early 80s. So when early 80s, when the dollar was sold for 75 kobo, not naira, it was 75 kobo to the dollar at that time. Nostalgic, isn't it? So as we discuss, we should be able to find out or retrace our footsteps, identify the devil's advocates using technology. In fact, they are even sabotaging the use of technology the way they have, the devil's advocates have been sabotaging the fixing of electricity and refinery for us to have the basic infrastructure. And therefore, Nigeria as a country should, as politicians themselves, should be able to deal with certain national issues, with national interests in a fiat way, just like the way it was done with the discipline of the military. And therefore, national interests should not be allowed to be toyed with by individuals, no matter how highly placed they are. We should be able to sit on the tail of the devil before it creates problems for us.
Well, so when you say politicians toying with the nation's issues, exactly what are you referring to?
I'm referring to the fact that the too much noise without much action, in the sense that since the First Republic, it was only the set of the First Republic under President Nnamdi Azikiwe, Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa Nko, with the three regions that who came together to initiate and create one state, which was Midwest, because the people in between at that time called Bendel and so on were torn between the West and the East, and therefore the initiative to have created that particular state was a great one. Otherwise, all the other states and local governments were created by the military. So all this brouhaha and ulabalu of politics is not helping us, and therefore I see that we have not followed the right steps of our political forefathers, the likes of Sardauna, Nnamdi Azikiwe, and the others. There were about 3 or 4 like that, including the sage of the West.
Well, Prof. Professor Kila, I mean, you've listened to others, and one of the things that you said was about being visionary, historical and visionary. It would seem like you are on the same page as, well, Professor Dequoi is on the same page with you on that, but not so much of Professor Azikiwe.
Well, I think, legitimately, Professor Azikiwe is taken by the topical issues. What do people want to hear? I'm not against what people want to hear, but there's a time and place for everything. The speech we heard today is a speech of 14th of May. It's a speech in which the government gives accounts of governance to say we came into power promising this, and this is what we have done so far. That is the anniversary of governance. And if you notice the president, he made reference to 6 years compared to since 1999. He's making it about the government of today. So Nigeria has 3 major speeches. And, you know, we should learn to understand, again, I repeat, the ethos of our calendar. We have a May speech, which is the date of governance anniversary. We have a June 12th speech, which is the date of democracy. And we have the October speech, which is the date of the forming of Nigeria. And there's enough space to respect those things, I argue. The topical issues are necessary, they're important. If you keep telling people just about bread, they're going to lack moral and intellectual wit to themselves. That is why we're creating a generation that is all about, is that what we're going to eat? You see, sometimes this idea of topical things, practical things, they're very good, but they're not enough. What sustains greatness is thought beyond need. And when we focus on just need, we're going to be caged into survival rather than greatness and prosperity. So the way to manage it, I argue, is to respect the calendars. Content-wise, and you see, I'm taking myself away from the content of this conversation because I think it's the wrong thing. Content-wise, I think this is balanced. The president says, in short, we're doing our best. Some people think our best is slow, they call it stagnant. Question is, do you understand why they say so? 1, because the best is not good enough for them. 2, because you're speaking to people who don't send letters anymore. They don't even use fax. They don't make photocopies. Things happen for them immediately right now. So the idea of gradual process is tough on people who are used to taking snapshots and sending it across the world immediately. The world changed the day instant coffee came and Polaroid camera started. Since then, we just don't follow it because we're stuck with topical. If we can have a big overview that links our progress, we'll see that the approaches will be different to things. And again, I predict this, that by the end of tomorrow, we'll talk about social media. Whilst the government is holding down on Twitter, I predict that some people are going to juxtapose President Buhari's speech to Joe Biden's speech, just to have a feel of that energy and a different kind of way of delivery.
Even though there are 2 different realities.
Although there are 2 different realities. But in that 2 different realities, there's something shocking about this decade. Everybody has their reality, but there is a global index. Because anybody from Kampala to Enugu to Osogbo to London to Sydney can actually easily connect and imagine that they're the same world. World, not countries. You see, countries are going. We're talking of world now. And the earlier we get it, the better for us.
But you know, Prof, because over the years, politicians make speeches, and in fact, most of the speeches, if not all the speeches they make, you always hear them talk about their achievements,
yes,
no matter the occasion.
Yes.
So, would it be fair to say, well, if one looks at it from the perspective of a professional in politics who will see something completely differently from the way full politicians see it, how do you reconcile that? Because if he gives a speech and he tries to set the scene respecting the calendar, as you were, and it's not in touch or perhaps somewhat devoid of what the current circumstances are, wouldn't certain groups say, look, what are you talking about here? This is completely different.
Well, they are, but they are already. Those ones that the president called stagnant scene. You'll always be criticized for whatever you do. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't care. That's what leadership is about. It's the idea to set a vision and to say, beyond where we are now, let me take you to another place. Let us get out of how it is done so far and try something bigger, at least new. You know, that's the whole point of leadership. It's not conforming.
Well, Professor Anthony Killer, we'd like to thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on the program this morning. I know you have a long day ahead.
Yes.
So have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
Well, let's bounce this now off Mrs. Dequoi. I mean, it is said that everything rises and falls on leadership. And as much as we have 200 million Nigerians, I mean, you have those millions of Nigerians looking up to the president, the governors, the local government chairmen, even though that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area. But today that we're focusing on leadership and how much that has impacted on the lives of average Nigerians, if you were to pick just one element of leadership in Nigeria that we need to really revamp, as it were, what would that be for you?
If I were to pick one element, I would pick accountability. I think the problem of leadership in Nigeria is that leaders are not accountable to the people. I think as well that then takes us to my position, is that leaders cannot be accountable until those who put them into office by way of votes or public expressions of support realize the relationship between the leaders and the led, and that there is a concept of accountability. And we cannot have that concept of accountability until there is education, widespread education. I'm not talking about political education. I'm talking about general education, maths, English, geography, history, civics. People have to understand their relationship to the country and to their leaders, and have to be able to express their wants, and then have to be able to ask their leaders questions, sensible questions, such that when the leaders get into office, they know they have people who will be watching them and who will be asking for accountability. Probably 10, 15 years ago, I was privileged to be part of a panel that interviewed candidates in Lagos State. It was a TV program, interviewing candidates for governorship and deputy governorship in Lagos State. And we were asking, what are your plans for the state if you are elected? How do you want to implement them? Those are the type of conversations that we need to have, and that we are not having. And we are not having because there's no accountability, and possibly because those who we have elected or appointed as our leaders are doing their best to ensure that there is no accountability. And that leads me on to another problem that I have with leadership, which is that even where a leader is called out, and I go back to our judicial system, because that's where I have the greatest interest. Even where our leaders, by leaders I mean those we appoint or elect or we put in positions of authority, even where they are called out for having misplaced the trust and confidence that we've reposed in them, and have been handed over to the police, to the EFCC, to the ICPC, and either it dies at that point, or when the matter then gets into the judicial system, nothing happens. Or it happens so slowly that the followers have lost interest, have come to a view that leaders are not accountable, nothing is going to happen. And by the time the majority of followers have a view that there's no point asking our leaders to be accountable because nothing is going to happen, the result is that they lose interest. Their views are, well, they're just going there to eat what they can eat. And therefore, how much are you giving me up front if you want me to rally support for your candidature? So my major issue is the lack of accountability. Well, and that's what we need to instill.
Well, there is a lot around that one as well. Definitely an ongoing conversation. But let me ask Professor Dequoi this question. Getting people to follow leadership. I mean, you talked about vision the other time and the fact that we need to have a historical trajectory to bring people on. But getting people to follow the vision while the realities are very, very staring right in their faces and glaring and biting, it can be a tough call, wouldn't you say?
Yes. Yes. Imagine a man of 61 years. Man of 61 years. I'm 62, just 1 year older than Nigeria. Look at me, a big man. So, some of the excuses are unacceptable in that it was indiscipline that came in. Because in the Second Republic, for instance, the party was superior than anybody, the governor and the president. When Chairman Adisa Akinloe, Chief Adisa Akinloe, had always had the guts to invite President Shagari to come and listen, even when President Shagari was on his way to travel. That was discipline. But imagine now we came back in 1999. But Mr. President decided to pocket the party at the federal level, and then the governors followed suit. And therefore that indiscipline came in. And earlier referred to the concept of patriotism. Patriotism, why? In that at least the Southwest was putting education just almost free for everyone. And coming to the instant that you grow up as a child, you notice that everything is being paid for. And where do you find the government giving you the sense of belonging? That was how our patriotism was killed. And that, yes, how it was killed. And therefore it was not led to bring it above. Our leadership, followership, and so on. It was the fact that we truncated the system where in the past the permanent secretary used to say, no, Mr. President, this is not right. This is against the law. We are not going to sign it. So that one was truncated, and it came with the IMF World Bank models in 1986 under military president Babangida, and the secretary to the federal government was Chief Olufalaye. So from that time we had a SAP, Structural Adjustment Program, and we lost control because we had traditional system working where the ward head should be able to identify XYZ doing the wrong thing. He will be called upon by the imam or the pastor, as the case may be, to be told, to be even disciplined by the society. We decided to rent away the mentorship of the children. In the past, anybody, any elder could drill the child who did the wrong thing. And unfortunately today, if you try to do so, the very possibility that the mother and the child will come together and tell the naive husband that he is harassing the child. And therefore, excessive protection of the children is not helping us. We have just found our own children, then become enslaved to them. Imagine by 12 o'clock, everybody is talking about school run. Rather than having schools within the system, within the environment, so that whether you are around or not, the children will go to school and mix with their own colleagues, grow up recognizing the fact that we have a variety of people, different cultures, that ought to bring a lot of money in terms of tourism. And that is exactly what the likes of Egypt have been making out to. So, again, I said there are certain national interests that the system should be stronger than the man. Stronger than the man in the sense that if governor does the wrong thing, the system should be able to do it, not following the constitutional system, very cumbersome, very difficult to recall anybody. And therefore, the moral mindset went away with the traditional institution degraded. And therefore, I believe that we can fix it, and then our parents, the elder ones, shouldn't be talking negative about people from other regions. We should always term correct our own children. Don't allow them to write anything on the social media. For instance, now, as we are talking now, go through the comments under the channels, and you will find out that a particular set of children from a particular region saying only negative things about this country. You will see them end Nigeria, Nigeria is so-so, Nigeria, calling Nigeria unprintable names. This is not supposed to be so. The system, the traditional system should be strengthened, and parents should be also liable, if at all they parented their own children.
Right.
Our own children shouldn't behave like as if they did not know their fathers.
Well, Prof, you know, much as you've raised those points, but it's not just up to the parents, because there are systems globally, there are certain things that they put in place to ensure that those kind of challenges are addressed. So the question is, do we understand why those comments are being made? And if we do, what are we doing to address them? Can they be addressed? You know, but I'm afraid this is how far we can go. Always a pleasure to have you on, Professor Khalifa Dequoi, lecturer, Public Affairs, University of Maiduguri. Pardon me, we need to go to break, and always a pleasure to have you on board. We will be back. We'll still have Mrs. Dequoi and Professor Azinge still with us, so don't go away. Welcome back to Sunrise Daily this Independence Day. Well, Professor Azinge, let me take this to you now. Speaking about systems, because it's on thoughts on leadership, what is your impression about how our systems currently run? Because there's always that conversation as to how we need to ensure it's not just about individuals who may come up or end up being stronger than the system. We need that collective to ensure that the system, no matter what happens, no one, as you say in law, no one should be above the law vis-a-vis the system.
Thank you. Very generally, people talk about building institutions and making the institutions as strong as possible. Again, you have to ask yourself, have we been able to achieve that? Because it's difficult to draw a line of distinction between strong individuals and weak institutions and vice versa. I believe that what is critical in terms of achieving that is to make sure that firstly, we learn to abide by the laws of the land, abide by the Constitution, respect rule of law, instill discipline amongst operators of government, one way or the other, as far as the three arms of government are concerned. If we're able to achieve that, especially abiding by the Constitution and respecting the rule of law one way or the other, I think we can end up building up such institutions. I don't think we lack the expertise or efficient individuals who are well-groomed and trained to man certain institutions in this country. But the point is, how strong are they in terms of respecting the Constitution and abiding by the rule of law, amongst others? So to that extent, it takes us back to the type of leadership we should aspire to build up in this country. Leadership that inspires confidence, leadership that is sacrificial, leadership that should know when to throw in the towel if the need arises, leadership that if you lose election, you accept that you have lost election and you are prepared to walk away and try the next time. That is the kind of leadership that I think we look forward to in order to be able to build up a very strong institution which will be greater than individuals, as the case may be. So until we're able to achieve that, I believe that we should be going around the circles and people will be dictating to others. Maybe the presidency or the executive arm of government will dictate to the judiciary, and the National Assembly, on the other hand, will also play their own game. We are not sure that we've been able to achieve that interdependence and that separation of power that we think we need in this country. Until we're able to do that, we will not be able to build up that institution. We should have a situation where people who are even appointed by the presidency are not answerable to the president because they feel that the right thing must be done at all times. If we're able to achieve that, then we have sufficiently built up the institution of our dream. But for now, we have not achieved that. But let me also quickly make this point, that what is obvious to us in that regard again is that the average Nigerian leader does not seem to have a sense of history. We don't have a sense of history. We don't play back to see the mistakes of others and not to make the same mistakes going forward. No, we keep making the same mistakes. We keep falling into the same booby traps, as the case may be. And also, more importantly, we lack and don't understand what legacy is all about. If you're in a position of leadership, you should be thinking of what will people think about my legacy when I'm out of office? How do I build up a legacy that I should be proud of when I'm out of office and I look at what I've been able to achieve and I've been able to hit my chest and say, I did my bit. We don't have that, and we have not seen that. So these are some of the issues we must put into consideration if we are thinking of building up strong institutions that can easily overwhelm the individuals that, of course, occasionally we seem to think that they are greater than the institution. Let us see what happened in America, especially January 6th going forward. Look at how things were handled. In spite of all that President Trump tried to achieve, the system was strong enough to be able to contend with that. That is what we look forward to in this country. And until we're able to achieve that, I believe that strong institutions will be difficult for us to come by, maybe in the next couple of years.
All right, Mr. Dequoi, could you talk to us in consideration of your experience at that session you had with politicians, interviewing those who wanted to come into office, and then also seeing the electorates and hearing those politicians speak? Do you think that, or how far away are we from ensuring that the economy becomes a major determining factor in electing those who govern us? Because it turns out that, look, economy is always a big factor. We've seen it in all the climes.
Very pertinent question, and thank you for that. Let me start from the back. The economy is pertinent. The economy is all that the average Nigerian thinks about today. Whether you are high class, you want to maintain your high class. Whether you are middle class, you want to maintain your standards. Whether you are, quote and unquote, the man on the street, you want to be able to continue to put food on the table for your family. So the economy is important and it affects everyone. And I think that it will be, or it should be, the main focus of forthcoming elections. I think also that we also need to focus on where the citizen meets the people. It's not at the presidency. It's not even at the governorship. It's at the local government level. And that takes me to what Professor Zinge has just talked about building strong institutions and how do we get there. Because currently we do not have strong institutions. We have strong leaders. We have leaders who have pocketed the local governments in their states. And it is at the local government that the majority of Nigerians interact with the administration of government. So that's where they feel the effect of the economy. For instance, it's the local government that has power to set rates of markets. They have control over the markets. Nigerians die every day. It's the local governments that have control over the cemeteries. Communication. It's the local governments that have responsibility for TV licenses and radio licenses. So they interact with the man on the street. And therefore, the economy is something that I would hope that even at the local government level, people who are contesting election as local government councillor or local government chairman will take on board when they are seeking votes. In those years back, we only had the campaign we only had the TV series for the candidates for governor and deputy governor, and from the various political parties, and asked each party to put forward their positions. And I was privileged to be on the team that we interviewed Babatunde Fashola and his deputy, and interviewed the candidates who are running on the other political platforms. And our questions for each were the same. What are you going to do when you're there? Everyone had highfalutin ideas. So we're going to do roads, we're going to build more housing, we're going to do this. Our next question, how are you going to achieve it? And that was what enabled us to at least bring out to our viewers those who had actually thought through their campaign plans and had some ideas to how they would implement, how they would fund, how they would distribute the quote and unquote the dividends of democracy to the people if they were elected. We need to extend that to the local governments when there are local government elections. And I think this is somewhere, this is an area where I think not just social media, but the television stations, the reporters, the fourth estate of the realm have a role to play in educating and being informative to the populace about local governments, where they are today, what they need, and providing a platform for those who are contesting office on each platform to say how they're going to fulfill those needs. Because until the populace even know, they can't hold the people they vote for accountable.
I mean, a lot of issues you have raised, really, and I mean, you've mentioned some solutions to tip in that balance in favor of effective leadership at the grassroots level. I mean, because I think that's an important point we've missed a lot. But I want to quickly borrow your experience in dispute resolution. I think a point was made earlier on in the program by Professor Killer, and he talked about being visionary, that we couldn't, that perhaps the president couldn't do that because there are a lot of unresolved issues. And I recall that Professor Dequoi also referenced that there are certain people from a certain region that, you know, have unprintable names to call the country, especially because they have unresolved issues as well. So I wonder, how can we resolve these issues? Because the president in his speech talked about dialogue instead of fighting to resolve our issues. And yet again, some areas were mentioned. But from your perspective, your professional experience, really, how can we bring this to bear in resolving our decade-long dispute?
Well, firstly, unless we're allowed to express our views, there's no basis for resolution. Because if you don't know my complaints, then there's nothing to resolve. I am a firm believer in our Constitution, which provides for freedom of speech. And personally, I see nothing wrong in any youth who has given up on the country Nigeria, saying or describing Nigeria in any way, shape, or form he sees or she sees fit. That is their view of Nigeria. It is then left to those that we have elected or appointed to lead to try and change that description, such that when that youth says something derogatory about Nigeria, other people will say, no, it's not that bad. This and this and this is what is happening. Yes, we must dialogue, but talking without doing. I think the Bible says faith without good works is dead. So we can talk and dialogue. We will not resolve those disputes unless things change.
Mm. Well, interesting perspective there, but let me ask Professor Azinge, part of the things that you have raised, Mr. Dequoi. Well, Professor Azinge, you have spoken largely about leadership as well, and I don't even know where to begin with you on that, but let's stick with your area of specialty, which is the law. Mrs. Adekoya talked about the fact that we needed to cascade leadership down to the grassroots, the local government and things like that. But that as at now, I think you also referenced something like that, it would seem like the local governments are not as prominent as they ought to be in the scheme of things. And there are those who point at the Constitution, saying that, you know, there are provisions for the federal government, there are for the president, there are provisions for governors, but there aren't specific provisions for the chairman of local governments. And that even at in the Constitution, there is a supervisory responsibility of governors of the states over the local governments. That in a way would affect how we treat the local government, wouldn't you say?
Well, not necessarily. I believe that Section 7 is so clear enough that of the Constitution that the local government can function as effectively as it can, given all the circumstances. I agree with Funka Dequoi totally on her propositions and the postulations made in that regard. And I think the point is such that it is generally believed that the local government is an appendage or a department of a state government. That ought not to be the case. Under the Constitution, she has reeled out all that they expected to achieve. Market, symmetry, some of the taxes here and there, amongst others. Very well, and they are well captured by the Constitution. If they are allowed to do their work, unencumbered, so to speak, from the state government, and they are also as accountable as she has clearly enumerated, I believe that we can make headway. But again, more often than not, you notice that Nigerians don't even look forward to the local government in terms of what they are doing, in terms of holding them accountable, because the government we see starts from the state government. So we're only interested in the state government and the federal government. Like I said, they see the local government wrongly, in my own view, as an appendage or an extension or a department of the state government. So we have that challenge, and until we reflect on that and try to address the anomaly therein, I believe that we'll continue making the same mistake. So the local government is a very, very critical stakeholder. The local government, they are critical stakeholders in the government of this country. They are the closest to the grassroots. They are the ones that people can identify with, people can relate with, more than even their representatives in the House of Rep or their senators, as the case may be. So we have tried to treat them as they were treated pre-1976, before the emergence and before the reform, as the case may be. And time has come for us to move away from that position and see the local government as a very, very important sector.
Oh, Prof, just 1 second. On the same issue that you have raised, I mean, you talked about the fact that, you know, the local governments have been pocketed, and that's the opinion of several people. But it wasn't always like that. I remember clearly in the Third Republic, there are certain local government chairmen that were very, very prominent and in the face of the people, you know, at the time. And the efforts that they made, in fact, I still see the gold service boss of the Lagos Island local government around from time to time. And that was how prominent, how strong many of them were in the Third Republic, at least from my own experience, because I lived in Lagos. So if they have been so derogated over the years, what, in your opinion, is responsible for that? And if the laws are as explicit as they are, what is holding us back from enforcing or from compelling enforcement of that constitution?
Well, I believe that hitherto, the issue of local government autonomy, especially in terms of finance, was not something that we were able to come to terms with. And to that extent, it was a case of he who pays the piper dictating the tone, as the case may be. And the state governments were the ones receiving the money and then, of course, remitting to the local government, whatever they wish to, as the case may be. But increasingly, we seem to be getting out of that, and we are now emphasizing local government autonomy, and we are thinking of issue of making direct remittance to the local government. If we're able to achieve that, because I'm not quite sure we have fully been able to achieve that. If we're able to achieve that, I believe that we will gain a lot of mileage in terms of autonomy, in terms of independence, and in terms of the capacity of the chairman and members of their group to aspire to achieve, as far as service delivery is concerned, and also impacting one way or the other the people around their local government. So we need to emphasize more the issue of autonomy of the local government. And let's face it, again, it is a question of the confidence at the disposal of the local government chairman. If the state government can go to court to challenge the federal government on issue of VAT, as the case may be, the local government, if they are strong enough, should be able to also go to court to enforce compliance as far as the issue of local government autonomy is concerned. I don't think they will be able to do so because they are looking over their shoulders to know what the federal government, the state governor will do, or the state government will do, as the case may be. Okay. So we don't have the right people with the courage of conviction to go and challenge certain anomalies, as we are already aware of. So these are the issues. But I'm sure that there will come a time when some other people will develop that confidence and also have that courage of conviction to address some of these issues.
Well, clearly, Mrs. Adekoya, you are raring to react to some of the things that you have heard. Please go ahead.
So, I think the solution, I think the problem came when we started voting for political parties and not for individuals. And I think that's how the state government pocketed the local governments. How many of us know our local government chairman, or our or our councillor, or our ward councillor? The issue, I think one of the solutions is that if we go back to a system where you are voting for the individual, not for the party, it will enhance accountability. I voted for you. I didn't vote for APC. I didn't vote for PDP. I voted for you. When you get there, you need to make sure that you work with your colleagues across the aisle, as they say in the US, to ensure that you deliver what you have promised to do. That's why we have crossing carpets with no restrictions. Whichever party wins at one level, those who are in the opposition just cross carpet and join the party in power. In 2011, when Lagos State instituted the land use charge, which I actually commend them for and which has been very successfully implemented. But when they instituted the land use charge, I had the privilege to have been instructed by a group of clients who felt this was wrong, and we went to court on the grounds that the state government did not have the power to implement the land use charge because that land use charge was actually a tenement rate, and the tenement rate was the responsibility of local governments. The case ended when the local governments, all the local governments in Lagos State, filed an application or an affidavit indicating that they had delegated their powers to collect tenement rate upwards to the state government. And the state government then sat with my clients who represented industry and reached a decision. The rates were lowered. We were told that the share of the money that would go to the local governments would still go to them. And so the matter was settled. Now, I don't know how many local governments actually go back to the state government to say, can I have X percentage of this land use charge? Because I need to develop my markets so that when they are developed, I can charge a higher rate, or I can attract more people so that there's more growth in revenue for my staff, so that the economy grows. Because until the economy grows, the arguments we're talking about, revenue collection and tax, is rubbish. We need to, first of all, grow the economy. And the economy starts from the local government. So perhaps what local governments need to do is to see how they can implement the required type of technology that the state governments have put in place to be able to access the resources that are available to them at the local government level, provide the services, and people will pay for it. Our cemeteries, at least in Lagos State, are in a terrible state. Our markets are no better. And those are the responsibilities of the local government where the majority of Lagosians interact.
Well, it is indeed an interesting country, isn't it? Well, that's how far we can go today. We have to thank you, Mrs. Funke Adekoya and Professor Epiphany Azinge, both of them senior advocates of Nigeria. Always a pleasure to have you both.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the restful independence.
Happy Independence.
Thank you. All right, let's take a look at some emails coming through from you. This one comes from Farouk, who's talking about the speech. He says the president's speech addresses the topical and contemporary issues. However, the substances that tend to guarantee the reality and the physical manifestation of the economic growth to salvage the masses from the impoverishment and abject poverty are far-fetched from the theoretical speech. Happy Independence celebration to all Nigerians.
Well, Festus Akiboyewa has his reasons why he thinks we are poor and underdeveloped after 61 years. He says it's because Nigeria has been going through 61 years of poor political leadership. The bitter truth is that for 61 years, Nigeria has been governed by leaders, both military and civilian, who have zero sense of purpose and zero sense of building inclusive culture. Those who have governed our dear country are only interested in obtaining and securing power than in the interests of Nigerians. Time for a paradigm shift, he says.
Isiama here is speaking for the youth, so to speak. Happy Independence Day to all Nigerians. Sadly, there is nothing in this president's speech that is uplifting to the teeming, jobless youths, hapless and hopeless Nigerians. Instead, it is full of veiled threats and not taking responsibility for the dire situation in the nation. No one speech will fix the current insecurity in the nation, but a speech can give hope to millions that their government cares about their plight.
Well, how do people react to, the president also said in that speech that no government since 1999 has done what this government has done in the last 6 years to put the country back on track. So it's about perspective, isn't it?
Oh, yes, I recall former military head of state also saying that, the military has done more than even democracy has brought to Nigeria. So you always have these statements, definitely.
There you go.
But as you said, they're just statements. What is important is the experience of people 61 years after. And what's happening in the lives of the 30, 40-year-olds now who didn't see the independence.
Well, keep hope alive wherever you are. We thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
I'm Kayode Okikelu.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Happy Independence.